Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. On Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Welcome to Inspired Conversations. I'm your host, Linda Joy, Mindset Elevation Coach, Intentional Living Guide, and publisher of the beloved Aspire magazine. I'm almost pinching myself because the show is now in its 9th year. It's hard to believe that we have shared hundreds of conversations over those years, conversations to inspire you to live deeper, more authentic lives. And today we're really talking about a topic that I think all of us can resonate with right now. Because if you find yourself in the cycle of overcommitting at the cost of your inner peace, I bet we have a whole virtual audience here saying, oh, I can relate to that. Well, today we're going to be talking about the unique challenges faced by women who overcommit themselves while silently carrying the weight of grief in their hearts. We're going to be delving into the emotional toll of always putting others first, the importance of honoring your healing journey, and Dawn will be sharing some actionable steps to reclaim the joy that may feel out of reach right now. I am so grateful that Michele Jackson is here with me today. Mindfully integrating 3 decades of nursing experience, Dawn combines her insight with her expertise as an advanced grief recovery method specialist and infinite possibilities trainer to help women heal their hearts, transform their lives, and rediscover joy. During her nursing career caring for children, veterans, trauma, and surgical patients, she discovered the intricate connection between body, mind, and spirit. Her personal journey of healing led to her heartfelt mission to help others illuminate their inner light and transition from surviving to thriving. She's also the best-selling author of Journey to Peace and Healing and Journey to Self-Discovery, 100 Days of Soulful Reflections. Dawn, welcome. I'm so glad you're here for this critical conversation.
Well, thank you, Linda. I'm just honored to speak with you today and to your audience.
Well, I got to tell you, your topic and your specialty really speaks to me as a woman because I can relate to how many times in my life that I overcommitted. And it came from a wound within me, I believe. But what I found is I would get resentful, and it was really no one's fault but my own. And I was like, how do I end this pattern? So let's talk about what it means to overcommit. And why do you think women are particularly prone to it?
You know, it goes back, I think, decades, when women were typically the caretakers for the children, the household, the men would go out and work. And so women have always held this belief that they needed to care for everyone else. And oftentimes that meant putting their needs aside. And as society has changed, obviously there's many men that are now caretakers themselves, right? So I don't want to say that it's just women that overcommit because men do the same thing, many men. But I will say that women, it's like inherently in our system to always be there for others, that feminine energy of wanting to help and to serve, and often to just push our needs aside instead of stepping back and realizing that when we do that, we don't benefit ourselves or anyone around us because, as you mentioned, we do become resentful.
Yeah, and I think I can remember back, like especially my 40s, grandchildren came and and I had a busy business. And I'm taking full personal responsibility because no one can take from us what we don't give, right? And
Right.
I didn't have any boundaries. It was like, oh, I can do that. Yeah, I can take that. Oh, let me help you with that. And then I'm like exhausted. And
Mhm.
I could feel that resentment building in my heart, and that's not who I am, and I know that's not who you or our listeners are. But it became such a pattern of putting myself at the end of my to-do list. And
Right.
you notice that too, not only in your own life, but in the clients that come through to you?
Oh, I do. My clients that I work with typically haven't focused on self-care because they felt that self-care was selfish. And that's a message that I feel strongly about is letting individuals know that self-care isn't selfish. It's caring for yourself and caring for those you love because when you make the time for you to honor what your body and your mind and your spirit and your soul needs, then you're able to show up for others in a completely different way, which benefits them and helps them heal as well. And by practicing this ourselves, we're a model for others, and it gives them almost this unwritten permission to do it for themselves.
It's so true, isn't it? It's like when what we model, especially, like my daughter's 40. Thankfully, she didn't pick up my habits, right? But I gotta tell you, maybe it's how she's wired, Dawn, because I will never forget the day. I still can remember this, and she's like I said, she's 40. She was about 15, and she was in the bathroom, and I could hear music and playing, and, I knocked on the door because she had been in there a little while, and she had, like, essential oils, the radio, she was painting nails, and I opened the door, and she goes, "Mom, what's up?" And I said, "Oh, I was just wondering, make sure you're good." She goes, "This is my time." And I'm like, "Goodness." She knew what it took me 40 years to figure out. She kind of innately knew to honor and nurture herself. Isn't that what we want for our children, our grandchildren? I have grandchildren now, so of course that's what I want. But somehow she skipped my modeling for a while. But I think it's so critical for emotional and mental health as well as our spiritual health.
Oh, I would definitely agree. And I love that story because normally our kids pick up what we teach them earlier in life, what we model. Like there's so many times I wish that I had had the tools that I have today when my son was younger, but I didn't have those until, he was a teenager. And so I see him following in my footsteps in some ways, the not always taking the time for himself. And, one of the hardest lessons to learn is that we have to let everybody have their own journey and learn things at their own pace versus expecting them to do things in a way that we're trying to model them now, but we haven't modeled in the past, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does. Because she's a Cancer, she's a born nurturer. So
Hmm.
her desire is always, she's the one like that keeps the family unit together, the extended family. She plans all the um, family functions. So she has that innate nurturing spirit, and I'm so glad that she turned it towards her. Now, for me, myself, it's still an ongoing journey, to
Hmm.
learn how to find that balance, especially like you, being an entrepreneur, right? We wear different hats.
Right.
And, but what I've discovered, and even getting to know you and your message about the overcommitted woman and emotional well-being and all that is we have to start with ourselves, as you spoke about a moment ago, not just to model now to our family, but it affects our own personal energy. And that energy creates the energy of the family, the energy of the community around us, and it ripples out. And when I got that way back when is my emotional and spiritual well-being, which I also call vibration, is
Hmm.
important for so many reasons. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I completely agree with you that, when my vibration and my energy is low, it affects the people in my house, it affects my family, my friends, everyone I come in contact with. Because as I step into a room or I step into a conversation, people can feel that energy, especially those of us that are empaths. We can feel, is this a good energy that we resonate with, or is this something that we want to walk away from? And so it's important to do our own healing, do our own self care. And healing is, part of self care. As women, we go through life, and as we were talking about earlier, we tend to constantly care for others and many times forget ourselves. And one of the things that gets forgotten is our emotional health. So things can be happening in our lives, but we've learned and we've come to the beliefs that we need to keep pushing forward despite the heartache that we incur, whether it's, you know, something happened with a friendship, we had a breakup in a relationship or a divorce, a death, our kids leaving the home and we're empty nesters, whatever that changes in our life, so many of us just keep trying to push forward. And so we end up with a heart that hurts. And that comes out in every interaction that we have with others. We, as you talked about, become resentful, we become burnt out. And it gets to the point that not only is our mental health suffering, but so is our physical health. And I used to see that all the time in my 30 years practicing as a nurse, is that my patients would have all these physical health issues. And if they were finally able to take that step towards doing some work on their heart and their emotional healing, their physical issues would improve.
Yeah, and I found that on my own life. Our emotional health affects our physical health, and the more we stuff things down, creates illness in other areas of our life. And
Yes.
we're gonna I want to continue this thread of the conversation because I know it's so important. We're gonna take our first break, everyone, and I want to invite you to learn more about Dawn at Dawn Michele Jackson. And Michelle, it has one L in it. Again, dawnmichellejackson.com. We'll be right back, my friends.
It's time to create space for you in your life instead of squeezing it in after you take care of everyone else. If you're feeling overwhelmed, burned out, and resentful, those signs are letting you know it's time for emotional first aid. Mindfully integrating 3 decades of nursing experience, Dawn Michele Jackson combines her empathic insights with her expertise as an advanced grief recovery method specialist and infinite possibilities trainer to help women heal their hearts, transform their lives, and rediscover joy. During her nursing career caring for children, veterans, trauma, and surgical patients, Dawn discovered the intricate connection between the mind and body. Today, with a compassionate approach, she expertly guides women to attain mind, body, and spirit wellness through her coaching, books, and retreats. Learn more at dawnmichellejackson.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. I'm Linda Joy. With me today is Dawn Michele Jackson. She is here talking about emotional well-being, overcommitting, and the cost of that to your inner peace, your health, and more. So one of the things I've always been the opposite, I think. I've always been really strong in my emotional and spiritual self-care, and I think that's because I struggled with anxiety and depression for the first 35 years, you know what I mean? So,
Yes.
and then I was not as strong in my physical well-being, like exercising, eating the right foods, or at least even eating consistently. And what I noticed is when I wasn't maintaining my emotional self-care, I was more prone to everything. The anxiety coming back, the
Mhm.
physical illness, colds, bugs, flus. So I love that you brought that up, that in your 30 years as a nurse, that you recognized it in patients in the hospital of that connection. So, what do you feel is makes it so difficult for women to prioritize themselves in their healing? Did you notice a thread through your time as a nurse as well as your time now serving clients as an advanced grief recovery method specialist?
I think one of the things is, as I talked about at the beginning of our conversation, is that women, have this inherent belief and desire to help so many people. And, you know, it's more of a recent thing that women have careers, right? Years ago, women used to stay home for the most part and take care of the family. Um, and now women are trying to juggle their career, their job, family life, friends, their community, all these commitments. And when you have to sit back and make a choice between taking time for yourself or all these commitments that you feel are important, sometimes women say, I'm just going to put my self care aside. I mean, even through the work that I do, there are days when I have to remind myself, you know what, I need to take this 15 minutes to meditate. I need to take this hour to go for a walk because my to do list is large. And so, I want to give a lot of grace to women and say, if you still struggle with this, or you've never considered that you need to put yourself first, be gentle with you because this is a new concept for many of us. But it is in those steps of creating the time for our self care, and it's all of it. Like you said, it's physical, it's what we eat, it's, exercising our body, stretching, it's being emotionally honest with what's going on inside of us and what's hurting our heart. It's all of this. It's a package that we need to make time for to be well.
Yeah, and for the way you just described it, I want every woman to hear that for a moment. We have to make time to be well. And Dawn, you write so much, and you're such a beautiful writer. So you share a lot on Aspire Mag, all about soul nourishing practices and so much more. And you also write for tut.com.
Yes.
Um, so one of the things that you had shared with the Aspire audience at one time was some soul nourishing practices for navigating life when the world feels dark, and
Mhm.
it does right now, without even going into the details
Yes.
of it. So we all have our personal stuff going on. We have the stuff in our own personal communities, our loved ones' lives, and then you go out to the larger expansion, the world. um, it can be overwhelming. So, what are some ways if someone is really feeling disconnected from themselves and really overwhelmed from their own lives and what's coming in the world? What are some strategies, tips, insights you would share with them?
Well, that's a great question, Linda, because I really see this right now. Most of us struggle. We have uh, the news at our fingertips all the time, whether it's through social media, whether it's we're getting emails, TV. It's all around us. So we're seeing what's going on in the world, and then we experience what's going on in our own lives. And what I notice is that even if we don't know someone, like when you watch the news and you see the hurricanes or the fires, it doesn't matter if you know someone that's being affected. Most people's hearts hurt watching these things because we have this connection with each other and we want the best for humanity. And so we see these things and it breaks our heart, and then we don't know what to do. And so some of the things I suggest are, first of all, being emotionally honest. That's not always easy because many of us were taught to just be strong and, to keep moving on and not talk about the way we're feeling. And it's okay. Maybe we aren't being affected by the fire, but personally, but we're watching it and it's causing sadness because we see other people hurt. So finding those people that can be a listening heart. And what that means is They'll listen without judgment. They'll listen without advice giving. They're just allowing space for you to be honest about your feelings. That's really important to first be honest. Another thing is, it's also important to make time for that self care, like we've been talking about. Breathe, you know, shut off your phone, shut off your TV, give yourself some space from, these things that obviously are causing heartache for you. It's okay to not always know what's going on, every hour of the day. So give yourself a break from some of those. And then to ask for help. Like, if you need help processing some of this, or if it's bringing out something else for you, because this is what happens when we see crisis in the world, when we see devastation and heartbreak, it brings up things from our past and we feel vulnerable. And oftentimes that's showing us where we need to do some healing, where it would benefit our lives, but we don't know how to start. And it's not easy asking for help. So stepping back and reaching out to those that we know that can be supportive or provide us the tools or resources is really important.
Those are such powerful practices. And I'm sitting here going, the being emotionally honest. I think you really hit something there too, because as you said, depending on the program we picked up as a child, some
Mhm.
of us don't have that skill set, those tools, right? And that's
Correct.
when everything, they can't even explain to themselves the deep sadness and pain. And that was me 30 years ago. And I can remember it was like a stacking.
Mhm.
Okay, this is another thing. And I never released it. So it was like energetically stacking. So my grief, my pain, my loss, my fear, whew, it was just building.
Right.
I
Yeah.
love that you said that and asking you questions, especially when you said about it could be the feelings that are intensified could be actually coming from something in your past, but we're not conscious of that when it's happening. And I can see
Correct.
that was my case back then, but I didn't see it
Mhm.
then. So that being emotionally honest, I think is key because it kind of, I'm curious, isn't it like almost like you're having a conversation with those deep feelings that normally are buried? It's like,
Right.
let me listen, let me talk to you, tell me what you want me to know. That's what I heard from your description.
Exactly. And, as you discussed, many of us were programmed early in childhood to not talk about the way we feel. I can't tell you how many of my clients I talk to, and I ask them, how did your family deal with grief? If, grandpa died or grandma died or somebody else passed away in the family, what happened? Well, they went in their room and isolated. And then if they saw me sad, they would say, you need to be strong, and wouldn't want me to talk about my feelings. And the problem with that is then what gets carried on in our lives. And so we learn that if we're sad or angry or whatever our emotions are, to not talk about them, and then we carry that on and one thing after another happens. I compare it to having a backpack. When you're born, your backpack is empty, and then all those little grieving events happen and they fill up your backpack until it's so full, like you cannot carry your backpack anymore. And so then you start noticing things happening. Maybe you're reacting to things that you wouldn't normally react to, um, and you don't know why. Well, it's because you have all this grief inside, this sadness, your heart hurts, and you haven't been able to process it, nor have you been able to give yourself that space because you're so overcommitted in so many areas of your life.
Oh, this really is hitting me. And you said something earlier too, and we're going to talk about it because we're going to take a next break, but it was about pausing, right?
Hmm.
And I think so many of us are just going 100 miles an hour and we're not really present in our lives. I lived that way for 40 years and now um, I just love mindful pauses, spaciousness, and all that. So when we come back, I want to talk about the importance of pausing because I really feel like it reconnects us with ourselves and kind of pulls us back from everything else around us. So we'll be back in a moment, my friends. I'm with Dawn Michele Jackson. You can learn more at her website, dawnmichellejackson.com. Again, that's Michelle with one L. And while you're there, be sure to check out her best-selling books, Journey to Peace and Healing, as well as Journey to Self-Discovery. I am so grateful that Dawn is here with us today talking about this important topic, and we'll be back to continue the conversation, my friend.
The time is now to deepen your intuition, connect with the archangels, your guides, and own your sacredness so you can live the empowered, inspired life you desire. Intuitive spiritual teacher, healer, and holistic life coach Robin Fitzsimons consciously blends her treasure trove of healing modalities, including Akashic Records, Sui Reiki, and silent counseling, along with working with the angelics to support the divine wellness of her clients' body, mind, and spirit. Through her popular online classes and sacred readings, including shadow work, awakening your intuition, channeled angelic guidance, past life healing, soul recovery, and more, Robin brings women deeper into the truth of who they are in a safe and sacred container. She is the founder of Wellness with Robin in Platteville, Wisconsin, where she offers in-person sessions and classes. Learn more at wellnesswithrobin.com.
You're listening to Inspired Conversations. Welcome back. I am so glad that you're here with me and Advanced Grief Recovery Method Specialist, Dawn Michele Jackson, who is really passionate about helping women unpack the grief, loss, emotions that they have been carrying around. As she beautifully said earlier, like we're carrying this backpack of pain that we've never unpacked. And so if you're feeling overcommitted, overwhelmed, lost, um, keep listening and be sure to visit her website. So Dawn, talk a little more about the pause and how we can, if someone's not used to doing that, because you know when you have a trauma response and you're always like on heightened alert, we kind of get into that hamster wheel, I must not stop, I must not stop. So talk about the power of the pause in helping us with emotional healing.
Yeah, that pause is really important. In fact, when you were talking about that, it reminded me that I used to, until I learned new tools, chaos was normal for me. And when I wasn't in chaos, meaning constantly busy, problems, trying to take care of everybody else's problems, I felt uncomfortable because I wasn't used to that quiet, that pause. And once I started doing my own personal growth work and learn new tools, it became very uncomfortable for me to be in that chaos anymore. It was like I felt sick, my nervous system was amped up, and that's still what happens today. Um, so I've learned that that pause is such an important thing. And maybe we don't have, you know, 3 hours in our day where we can go walk in the woods or on the beach. Maybe we just have 15 minutes, but that pause allows us to ground ourselves and recenter and come from a healthier state, especially when we're interacting with others. We can so often react versus respond, where reacting is kind of an automatic response, right? Oftentimes it's anger, it's being short with somebody. But when we can take that pause and step back, we can respond. We can come from the highest version of ourselves. And that's why it's so important to take that time. And it doesn't matter what you do. If you want to just breathe, focus on your breath, if you want to step outside for a few minutes, if you can't get away from anybody unless you go sit in the bathroom, then go sit in the bathroom, you know, and just have a few moments to yourself for that pause because it benefits everyone around you. And most of all, it benefits you because when we cannot show up as the highest version of ourselves, we beat ourselves up. I'm sure you can relate to that.
Oh, yeah, the shame, the
Yes,
self-condemnation, like, "Oh my god, I can't believe I did that because I wasn't taking care of me," then we blow.
right.
And then we feel better, but then we caused pain and chaos, right? And
Mhm.
it's almost like the kettle, right? It's
Yes.
starts building until the whistle starts. That's what it
Mhm.
feels like when we come from a place of reaction. So, oh, I agree, and I have a lot of listeners like you and myself who are empath sensitives, and our nervous systems are so sensitive, and
Mhm.
and sometimes we're not aware of that, right? We're not aware that it's our nervous system reacting, but what you said earlier was, you would be in this nonstop, I'll use my words, agitation.
Right.
So let's say right now with everything going on, people
Mhm.
are feeling their nervous system is like overstimulated. They don't know how to calm it down.
Mhm.
Since we're on this track, let's talk about that because right now someone could be listening going, I understand all this, but I don't know how. What can I do to calm my nervous system down when I'm feeling activated, is the word I use. Any
Yeah.
tips or practices you could share?
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. And one thing that I really want to bring up that's important is that many of us empaths live with someone that maybe isn't quite as sensitive to energy, and they have ways in their body that they can process a lot of this stuff coming in. Maybe it's because they've had a background in the military or whatever it is. And so for those people who live with someone that isn't quite is energetically sensitive, it's really important to be honest about how things affect us. And sometimes we just have to um, give ourselves that distance, like, maybe go into a different room and listen to some calming, healing music. I oftentimes have YouTube on. It's actually on in the living room with just healing vibrational sounds because it just changes the energy in my house. So it's really important to honor that, we need, even if there's other people that live in our house that don't need the same type of support for their emotional well being, right? A lot of times going outside, just spending time in nature, going out and letting the sun come onto your face and picking up that vitamin D, that's really important. Journaling. I love journaling because it's a way that we can get out our emotions and our thoughts. And sometimes that's all we need for the moment is to just get them out on a piece of paper so we can kind of move on, right?
Well, journaling to me is like have always said, it's like a conversation with my soul. It's not for anyone else.
Right.
It's like for this almost like a two-way communication because I believe that whatever shows up on the paper is no accident. There's a message.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love that. And you spoke about one of my favorite ways to soothe my nervous system and my soul is going out in nature. There's something, even if there's days I can't walk for 30 minutes. And I live in New England, so right now we got snow. But Dawn, sometimes like if I'm in between tapings or client calls, in good weather, I'll walk around my house 3 times. It takes maybe 8 minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's something about giving yourself that gift of and that's like a pause, right? A pause in my day.
Yes.
And I'm in nature tapping in. It grounds me, it recalibrates me.
Mm-hmm.
So journaling, you mentioned, stepping outside in nature. How do we quiet the little mind that is like, well, you got to focus on this and you got to focus on that, and the world is this. How do you calm the mind down? Do you have
Um,
a way?
For me, I've noticed even more and more recently that it is those healing vibrational sounds that kind of calm my mind down and focusing on breathing. So many times I'm, I think, just barely breathing. And I've actually had healthcare providers say, you really need to take deeper breaths.
Yeah, that's me, honestly, Don.
Yeah, I think it's left over from things in my childhood and times where I didn't feel, or I was worried about whether it was my emotional safety, my physical safety, something like that.
Like
Um,
waiting for the other shoe to drop energy.
exactly. Yeah. And so I would be like holding my breath, right? It's like being quiet so nobody sees you. So I constantly have to remind myself, okay, take a deep breath, let, the oxygen fill my lungs completely and flow through my body. And that's such a great way for me to calm the mind, as well as listening to those healing, energetically calming sounds, because our world, let's be honest, is full of so many sounds that are not calming. Whether
No,
it's,
they
yeah,
overactivate everything.
yeah, our cell phones going off, dings on computers, cars, the news, whatever it is. And I used to work in the ICU. And so I would go home and dream about alarms because there were monitors on for all my patients. And people don't realize how disruptive that is to your nervous system. And after a period of time, your nervous system has a really hard time calming down. And so, doing these things that help you feel more calm in your body, and it's different for everybody. But what I would say is drop into your body and your intuition. What are those situations that help you feel more at ease, that help you know that all is well, that you're going to be okay? And then try and put yourself in those situations, whether it's sitting out in the sun or listening to something, spiritually uplifting, spending time in meditation, whatever it is that can give you a few minutes of reprieve from your constant to do list and your thoughts will benefit you greatly.
I laughed when you talked about the breath because when I first met Dana, we've been together 30 years ago. We'd be watching TV, he goes, "Hey, breathe." I go, what are you talking about? He goes, "You were holding your breath." And I didn't even realize I was holding my breath constantly. And it comes back, of course, from childhood. Now I'm much better, but I was sick a couple of weeks ago and I had a lot going on my plate. And all of a sudden he goes, "Hey, breathe." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe I did it." But I can actually feel it because all of a sudden I go and let it out.
Right.
So many of us don't realize our breath has
Mm-mm.
so much information, right?
Mm-mm.
And I am like you, I have to remind myself to take those deep breaths because I am a shallow breather because of past trauma. And so I could relate to what you're saying. So thank you for sharing that because I don't think some people would even recognize that there is a sign of, I want to say anxiety, stress,
Mhm.
all of the above.
Right.
So I'm glad that you brought that up. So
You know what?
we're going to take a final breakdown, and when we come back, I want to continue this conversation and also talk about some of the feelings because I want to normalize um, having these feelings, which you write about and talk about a lot, versus dismissing them, especially
Mhm.
during these crazy times. So, ladies, stay with us. We'll be back in a moment with Dawn Michele Jackson. You can visit her at dawnmichellejackson.com, grab her free gift. She has multiple there. Grab a copy of her books and learn more about her work as an advanced grief recovery method specialist. We'll be back in a moment, my friends.
It's time to begin the adventure of a lifetime by nurturing the most important relationship you will ever have, the relationship with yourself. Kelly Grimes, self-nurturing expert, speaker, and author of the bestseller, The Art of Self-Nurturing, a field guide to living with more peace, joy, and meaning, shares that a self-nurturing practice is not about being perfect or completing another thing on your to-do list, but rather nurturing a relationship with yourself. In The Art of Self-Nurturing, you'll discover the inspiration, examples, reflective questions, and self-nurturing practices that will empower you to become the artist of your own life and see self-nurturing as an art form. Rather than living from obligation and overwhelm, You will learn to cultivate a life filled with self-compassion and self-love. Order your copy today at artofselfnurturingbook.com and receive the Self-Nurturing Starter Kit as a supportive gift.
Welcome back. You're listening to Inspired Conversations, and I'm with Michele Jackson. Dawn, right before the break, you were going to add to the conversation, and we had to jump to break. Is there anything you wanted to add about the breath and what we were discussing prior?
Oh, yeah. So I reminded myself of something, and actually, I learned about it in one of your programs. And that is, I have an app on my phone, and yes, it does make a sound, but it's a really beautiful chime. And what it is
Mhm.
it's a mindfulness bell. So every hour on the hour, it goes off between working hours. And what it does is it takes me out of my present thought, which sometimes, is, oh, what do I have to do next? Or what hasn't been done today? And reminds me to be present with myself. It reminds me to take a deep breath and to focus on all the blessings in my life. So it's actually been a huge gift. People will say, what is that ding that goes off on your phone? And I'm like, it's my mindfulness bell. And it really has helped me like recenter when I find myself kind of in thoughts of um that aren't helpful to me, right? And so I thank you because that's how I learned about it was from you.
Well, I got to tell you why I think it's so important too, especially for those of us, and you and I sound like we have like similar way of processing. Hours can go by and I'm in doing energy. I'm not even present in my body. I'm probably sometimes not even present in the room. And I realized, I got to break the pattern. And
Right.
as you shared, just hearing that beautiful sound, at first I was like, oh, come on, I don't have time to stop. And now it's just such
Mhm.
a pattern. It's a beautiful pattern because then I come back into my body. I come back into being present. And then I'm like, is what you're doing really important? Is the train of thought you were
Mhm.
having serving you?
Right.
Right? It's like don't you feel like it's a touchstone? It's a touch point.
Yeah, it's like a little reminder to love me, to honor me and what I need versus just going through the motions of I need to get this done or I need to um you know focus on this project or this task. It just brings me back to myself, which is really important, and it only takes a few seconds every hour, so I just find it really nurturing to my soul.
Yeah, and one of the things, especially for you, I could see it even being more powerful for you because for 30 years, you're a trauma nurse. So you
Mhm.
were on high alert, waiting for the shoe to drop. So I can't imagine how activated your nervous system was, especially as an empath. And then this is a way to say, every hour it's a touch point. Are you here? Are you in your body? Everything is safe. You are good. You don't have to be doing, chasing, and waiting for the shoe to drop. Is that how it feels for you? Because that's what it feels like in my body for myself.
Oh, it definitely does because, when I was doing my work as a trauma nurse, there were times where I didn't get a break. In fact, when I was pregnant, I went out early on maternity leave because I wasn't getting my breaks. I couldn't eat because people's lives were at stake. Like I didn't have time sometimes to just eat or to put my feet up or to just take a deep breath. So my nervous system really learned to constantly be on. It was like a fight or flight thing. And so I can find myself easily getting back into that. And so I have to be conscious. I really have to nurture my nervous system so that I can stay in a state of non fight or flight, a calm state, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does because then that energy ripples out to the world. So it's really the gift that we give ourselves is actually a gift that we give to others, but it has to begin with us.
Yes.
And so, why do you feel it's so important, especially in times like this, to normalize our feelings instead of dismissing them?
Because when we dismiss our feelings, it's adding to that backpack that we talked about earlier, or we can compare it to a tea kettle, right? You just shove more in there and try to keep moving forward without um, just being emotionally honest with your feelings and allowing them to be processed. And it ends up we are resentful, our nervous system's stressed out, we're not showing up how we want to show up in the world. And you- so, when I talk about grief, it's always the elephant in the room for so many people. In fact, when I became a grief recovery specialist before I signed up for the training, I said, I don't have any grief. Because a funny story is my significant other signed us both up. He wanted me to go through it with him. And I said, I don't have any grief. And I joke about that now because we're all grievers, 100% of us. We have
Mm,
grieving experiences from the time we're born until the time we die. But the thing is that we haven't normalized grief. It's always that big elephant in the room, that scary thing. Many people equate it just with death, but we have grieving experiences over so many things. I mean, we think about, times maybe kids weren't nice to us when we were in elementary school or middle school or high school. There's any significant change in our life or thing that doesn't feel good event that happens to us leads to grief. And so it's important that we normalize the way we feel because grief is a normal and natural reaction to things that happen in our life. And when we normalize our own grief and our own heartache, then we can normalize it for other people and we can be that listening heart when they need support. We can sit there and hold space. And really that's the one of the most beautiful gifts we can give someone that's hurting is we don't have to say anything. We could just sit there and hold space and say, I can't imagine how you're feeling, but I'm here to support you.
just that response, right?
Yeah.
It that resonated with me on a deep level because I think sometimes not sometimes, I think the majority of us, and I grew up this way, is, "Oh, I'm feeling this," and the family says, "Let me fix it," or they get over it. There is no
Correct.
just let me just let me be with it. There was
Mhm.
either fixing, smothering, or dismissing. And so that becomes all our patterns, right? What maybe not
Yes.
all three for everybody. And just what you said, I can't imagine how you're feeling. Wow,
Mhm.
what a validation for that person.
Mhm.
No matter what they're going through, maybe they lost a job, a relationship, or a love.
Right.
Like you said, which I think is so important to keep educating people, Dawn, the way you do, is grief is not just from the loss of a loved one. Maybe it was
Mhm.
a dream, loss of a career. It could be so many things that leaves grief in our bodies.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
that was beautiful. Be a listening heart. And I'm going to take that one into the next few weeks with me because there is so much going on. And I have family members, and friends that are hurting. And that really spoke to me on how I can be more present with them and not fall into wanting to fix it
Mhm. Well,
or or minimize it.
yeah, so most of us don't want to see those we love hurting. And
Yeah.
so we learned that okay, let's try and fix it. Let's try and help them fix this problem so they'll feel better. But the thing is most grievers just want to be heard. They don't want to be fixed. They just want somebody to listen and just be that space, that beautiful, loving space, just knowing that someone has heard your story. I can't tell you how many, and it makes me want to cry right now, women that I talk to that have experienced a miscarriage and no one knows in their life except for their partner because
Yeah.
they didn't feel like people would be supportive because so many times they hear, well, you have other children, well, you can try again. Those type of unhelpful comments people say because they don't know what else to say, but it makes our heart feel worse. And so
Mm.
many people suffer in silence because they don't feel safe talking about the way they feel. So I always tell my clients, my friends, my family, just be that listening heart, hold space, don't compare because, even if you and I had lost, like, say we were sisters and we lost our mom, um, I'm not going to know how you feel and you're not going to know how I feel because we have unique relationships with mom.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
yeah, and we both have different thoughts and feelings and life experiences. And so by saying to someone, I know how you feel, that minimizes their feelings.
I'm so glad you brought this up. It's a beautiful way to about the listening heart and all your guidance. It's a beautiful way to bring our conversation to a close. And it's one that really resonated with me. A lot of what you said resonated, but the listening heart, I want to be that listener. So I want to invite everyone, please, right now it's a difficult time. Dawn is a extraordinary listener, and she's also an extraordinary writer. And I want to invite you visit her at dawnmichellejackson.com for her content. She has so many tips and strategies. You're going to find powerful supportive gifts on her website also, including 5 principles of emotional first aid for the overcommitted woman. And follow her on all her social media platforms. Now more than ever, we need the tools to help us navigate these times and stay emotionally, spiritually, and physically healthy. So, Dawn, thank you, my friend, for circling up with me today.
Well, thank you, Linda, for inviting me to be a part of your conversation. It's been such an honor to share with your community.
Well, thank you, my friend, and thank you for the work you're doing in the world. Until next time, my friends, choose love, choose joy, choose happiness. Blessings, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. Join our sacred space every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern and meet leading female visionaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. Inspired Conversations with Linda Joy is a soulful venue where guests share the obstacles they've overcome, along with wisdom and lessons learned on their personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic and soulful living.